Hey guys, it's Bella. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you had a great weekend. Happy Monday, everybody's favorite day of the week. If you're new here, welcome. We talk about true crime cases here on this channel on Mondays, so if that's something you're into, please make sure to subscribe and join the fam. I do have a video not on Monday this week. I've got another video coming on Friday this week as well to make up for missing last week, but I promise I had a good reason to miss last week. I spilled iced coffee all over my laptop and fried it. I fully almost had a breakdown in the Apple store. I was like sitting in the Apple store. I took it there immediately and like got them to check inside to make sure the whole thing wasn't fried, and they come out and they're like, yeah, it's fried. Like it hit I don't even know what the main part of it is, the motherboard. The iced coffee got all over the motherboard. They're like, yeah, sorry. It's gonna cost £1,500 to fix it. I was like, oh. Amazing. I decided not to get it fixed. I took it home and just like let it dry out for a week, and then I just opened it a couple of days ago and it's working and I don't have to get it fixed. Thank God. I mean, it could just stop working on me at any moment is what they said. Like it could work and then just randomly die, but I'm hoping that's not the case. So we also just moved house. You might notice, new background. We just moved house like a couple of days ago. So it's kind of all been happening at the moment. We're going back to Australia in like 3 days to visit everyone, visit Mia. I can't wait to see her. I'm actually dying. So there's a lot that's been going on at the moment. So I didn't post last week, but I'm posting an extra video this week to make up for it. Anyway, today's case that we're going to be talking about is actually insane. I know I say that a lot, but when I look back on this case as a whole, it honestly sounds more like the plot of a spy movie than an actual case. It's the case of 31-year-old Gareth Williams. He was an MI6 code breaker, and his body was found padlocked inside a duffel bag at a security services safe house. Originally, the Metropolitan Police said that the death was suspicious and unexplained, but they have since ruled the death as accidental. Which, how does somebody accidentally climb into a duffel bag, zip it up, and then once it's zipped, they somehow from the inside manage to padlock themselves into the duffel bag? You tell me. So Gareth Williams was born in Valley Anglesey in Wales on the 16th of September 1978 to parents Ellen and Ian. He had one sibling, a younger sister named Kerry, and the whole family was super close. Gareth was an amazing older brother to Kerry, and she said, quote, "In terms of a big brother figure, Gareth was perfect." From a young age, he fell in love with computers. He was obsessed, and it was an obsession that didn't go unnoticed by those around him. The head teacher from his primary school said that he would often beeline for the computer, where he would just sit there for hours. Outside of computers, his other big love was mathematics. Math was his real calling in life, and he was considered a genius from a really early age. He actually completed a GCSE in maths while still in elementary school, and then went on to start high school at the age of 10, where he achieved A grades in A-level maths and computer science. So he was a really smart dude. Like, he was significantly smarter than pretty much everyone around him, and because of this he was pretty alienated from his peers throughout his childhood. You know, while they were out on the playground playing tag, he was in the library learning. He was just in love with maths and computers, and he wanted to spend every second that he was awake learning. By the time he was 17, he had already completed a part-time maths degree at Bangor University, and his peers observed his naivety in social situations, and even his own father backed these claims up, saying that he just wasn't a great conversationalist. I'm not sure if it was because he was just a bit shy towards people that he wasn't close with or what, but from what I gathered, he didn't have any trouble communicating with his family. Especially his father, who, you know, they always went cycling together, and the two of them were just really, really close. Cycling was a hobby that they both enjoyed together. When they were training, they would ride together and talk for hours, and they would also compete and race together. When Gareth was 18, he began his PhD at Manchester University and was preparing a dissertation focused on computer games, which was a hidden passion of his. He loved playing video games and had garnered a reputation online as being highly skilled. It was during his time at Manchester University that he was approached with a job opportunity from the Government Communication Headquarters, or GCHQ. They are basically kind of like a relative of MI6. So in the UK, you have 3 intelligence agencies. You have MI5, MI6, and GCHQ. And GCHQ's scope of work is pretty much anything and everything related to communication. They primarily focused on analyzing communications, so like emails, texts, phone calls, that sort of thing, cyber defense, and then also protecting sensitive government information. They are a vital part of the country's defense against terrorism, espionage, and military threats. They basically saw Gareth's gaming capabilities and they thought that he had a really great potential as a code breaker, which was a massive deal for Gareth, of course. He's 22 years old by this point, so he's this young guy who has just been approached by, one of the 3 main intelligence agencies in the UK. So it's pretty cool. He moved into a room in Prestbury in Gloucestershire and he paid rent there for a decade, like 10 years. But he would often, have to leave for work. It was just the nature of his job. So although he was always paying rent there consistently, his room would often sit vacant. It's hard to describe as well what exactly he did for GCHQ because obviously a lot of his work was private. So the information we do have about his job is mainly just whispers from like ex-colleagues and media speculation. But it's understood that his work involved handling sensitive data which could have related to enemies of the state. Gareth began working for GCHQ back in 2000, and when the US invaded Iraq in 2003, a large part of GCHQ's focus was on potential terror threats globally. It's alleged that he worked on software which could analyze vast amounts of communication data to find patterns. He may have also been involved in intercepting emails and phone calls between a group of British radicals who planned to detonate explosives on board 7 flights to major US cities. The foiling of the liquid bomb plot has loosely been attributed to Gareth and his team, and a former employee of GCHQ also told media that Gareth had been obsessed with the case of Anna Chapman, who was one of the 10 people arrested in the UK in 2010, accused of being part of a Russian espionage ring. So Gareth really was the cream of the crop when it came to deciphering information. His efforts as well did not go unnoticed, and eventually he began working for MI6. Of course, working for MI6, again, pretty much everything he was doing was top secret. A lot of his work was confidential, but from the outside it looked like Gareth was taking on a lot more of an in-field role rather than sitting behind a desk like he was for GCHQ. During his time with MI6, it became clear that he, the job just wasn't what he was expecting, and he privately told his sister that he wasn't happy about it. He was headed back to GCHQ to work on a joint operation with the US NSA, but before he could return, he mysteriously disappeared. It's no secret that he was handling some very sensitive information that had been intercepted between some very dangerous parties like the Russian, Chinese, and Turkish gangs. He honestly had his finger in just about every underworld pie. So this obviously meant that he had a massive target on his back. On the 15th of August in 2010, he was seen on CCTV footage at a cash machine at 2 p.m. After this, he went to Harrods, and then shortly after that at 2:30 p.m, he's seen again on CCTV footage walking down Hans Crescent in Knightsbridge, and that is the last time he was ever seen before he vanished. 8 days later, on the 23rd of August, Gareth's sister Kerry contacted GCHQ to let them know that she hadn't heard from Gareth since the 10th, so she was starting to get really worried. And Gareth also hadn't been at work since his disappearance, which is really concerning in and of itself because you would think a place like GCHQ or MI6 would have reported it to police by this time. They hadn't heard from him. He hadn't come into work. Considering his field of work and how, dangerous it is, you would think that they would be more concerned for the welfare of their employees, and they would be more concerned that an employee has not shown up in this amount of time, an employee who has a massive target on his back. On the day that Kerry contacted them, the 23rd of August, is when GCHQ contacted the police to report Gareth missing. On that very same day, so we're still on the 23rd of August, a police officer went out and conducted a welfare check at the safe house where he was staying in Pimlico. And when nobody came to the door, they were given access by a letting agent to his top floor apartment. And upon first inspection, the place appeared to be, pretty tidy. The only thing that seemed to be out of place was a laptop, 2 phones, and a bunch of SIM cards that were on a table in his living room. Other than that, everything seemed to be pretty normal, aside from the fact that it was really hot up there, which turned out to be because the heating was all the way up, which is super bizarre considering nobody was at the house. As they made their way through the rest of the apartment, that is when they found something really sinister in the main bedroom's ensuite. Sitting in the bathtub was a red North Face duffel bag that had been padlocked from the outside. From the bag leaked a red fluid that looked like blood, and inside the bag was the naked, decomposing body of Gareth Williams and the keys for the outside padlock. There were no signs of a struggle, and this was the only thing that was out of place in the whole apartment. There was a quilt on the floor in the main bedroom, although this never really proved to be useful. So of course, an investigation got underway right away, and the first thing authorities had to do was come up with a plan of how they were going to investigate this, considering Gareth's top secret work that he was involved in, because while they were determined to uncover what had happened to Gareth, they were also determined to protect national security by protecting the details of his work. They cordoned off his apartment and they had armed security guards out front of it around the clock to protect it. Gareth's parents were in the US when his body was discovered, so they immediately hopped on a plane straight back to the UK as soon as they heard. And I mean, they were obviously heartbroken. They also knew that Gareth worked for GCHQ, but Gareth kept them in the dark about what he actually did. I mean, for obvious reasons. I'm sure he signed a million disclaimers saying that he wasn't allowed to tell anybody. So when his family started seeing these news headlines that were like British spy murdered, they really started questioning what he actually did for GCHQ and if he really was a spy. You know, they were questioning the true extent of his double life, I guess, that he was sort of leading. Now, Gareth's body was of course sent off for an autopsy, and the coroner who did the autopsy reported that there were no injuries on his body. There were no signs of any sort of struggle. There was DNA found at the flat belonging to between 10 and 15 people, although investigators were unable to identify who it belonged to. There was no DNA on the bathtub or the duffel bag, not even belonging to Gareth. DNA was eventually found on the zipper fasteners and the handle of the bag. However, this was never matched to anyone. There was also a bit of DNA found on a towel and on Gareth's phone, but again, there was no match. It just makes no sense for there to be essentially no DNA from Gareth at all in his own bathroom, which obviously indicated that somebody had, at the very least, cleaned the bathroom. The front door had also been locked from the outside, which indicated that somebody else was involved. Because how could Gareth lock the front door from the outside if he was in a duffel bag in the bathroom? There was evidence to suggest that the data from Gareth's phone had been backed up to a laptop at 11:30 p.m. on the 15th of August. It was also found that one of Gareth's devices had visited a cycling website a few hours after that backup was done at 1 a.m. It's impossible to rule out the fact that this could have been somebody else who, did this backup and looked up this cycling website from Gareth's phone. So there's every chance that he was already dead when this was done, and it was actually the killer who did these things. The coroner who did his autopsy also made a note that there was no alcohol or recreational drugs in his system, although the toxicology report came back inconclusive. Some reports online say that there were trace amounts of alcohol and GHB in his system, but this could have been naturally produced after his death. His cause of death was ruled to be undetermined due to the advanced state of decomposition his body was in. There was a chance that he was poisoned. They couldn't rule it out due to the length of time that his body had been decomposing for, because the typical methods used to do this, like chloroform, cyanide, insulin, all would have been undetectable by the time they were able to test his body. There was also, like I said, he had no injuries on his body, and there were no distress marks inside the actual duffel bags, no signs of him trying to get out of it, which indicated that he was already dead or unconscious when he was put in the duffel bag. When they were trying to establish a timeline, they determined that he likely died in the early hours of the 16th of August. As I mentioned earlier, the Metropolitan Police initially ruled his death as suspicious and unexplained, but there was, like I said, no evidence. So they really had to knuckle down in this investigation to prove that there was any sort of foul play. We've got this government intelligence worker who's gone missing and has then been found dead and stuffed, locked in a duffel bag. From the surface, if you take everything else away and don't even consider who Gareth Williams was, it's obviously suspicious. You don't just wind up in a duffel bag by accident, and it's almost impossible to, lock a padlock onto the outside of the duffel bag when you're locked inside. I feel like that alone is enough to prove that there was some sort of foul play involved. An expert who assessed the scene agreed that, quote, if he was alive, he got into it voluntarily, or if not, he was unconscious and placed in the bag. And obviously, like, I find it hard to picture a scenario in which he would get in the bag voluntarily unless it was like somebody forcing him at gunpoint or whatever the case may be. And even so, you would think that once they left the apartment or once they made him get into that duffel bag, he would try and get out. He would try and open it. He would scratch at the duffel bag, but there were no signs of distress from inside the duffel bag. I suppose maybe, like, some people could argue that he was practicing an escape artist thing in case he ever got in that sort of situation, but it seems very specific. And you would think if he was doing that sort of thing, again, there would be signs of him trying to get out of the bag. A recreation was done to see if it would have been even possible for Gareth to have squeezed himself into the bag and locked it from the inside. And from the test, it was proven that he could have done it, but it would have been extremely, extremely difficult and unlikely. And even if he could theoretically have done this to himself, why would he? And why would he not try to get out? The potential that this was a very elaborate suicide was an early line of inquiry, and because of the extremely bizarre conditions, obviously nothing could be ruled out early on in the case. Further investigation also uncovered that he had £25,000 worth of women's high-end clothing in the wardrobe in his apartment, including 26 pairs of women's shoes, which was odd to say the least. He had no known love interest, like no one in his life said that he was dating. And so to have such a valuable wardrobe of, you know, items for the opposite sex brought up a lot of questions. And with so many questions, of course, there comes a lot of rumors, and rumors of Gareth's private life started to circulate. According to the woman that he rented a room from in Cheltenham, she said that she and her husband actually had to go and rescue Gareth in 2007 when they heard him like screaming for help from his room. And when they got in there, basically he was just tied to his bedpost, like his hands and his feet were tied to the bedpost. And he told them that he was just trying to see if he could get out of it, but they believed that it was actually more of a sexual thing. Investigations also uncovered that before his death, he had visited a few different bondage websites, but this was believed to be an infrequent occurrence. And his family also said that they believed this was probably just him doing research for his Secret Service training. Now, by this point, the investigation was moving pretty slowly because there was a lot of pushback from Secret Service agencies trying to suppress a lot of information due to the nature of Gareth's work. They didn't want any information getting out there that might compromise national security. Eventually, the Secret Service took over the case and they were working with the FBI while the FBI was simultaneously conducting their own investigation into the case. An e-fit photo was released of two people who were seen entering through the communal entrance of Gareth's building in June or July of 2010, but this turned out to be a dud lead, and it was determined that they had nothing to do with the investigation. Eventually, they thought that they did get a major lead when they managed to recover some DNA from Gareth's hand, and they were like, well, whoever this DNA belongs to, they must have accidentally left it there, and they're responsible for Gareth's murder. But it turned out to be a mistake in the labs. The DNA actually belonged to a scientist who first attended the crime scene, so that was just another dead end. And then ultimately, the Metropolitan Police ruled his death an accident. I just cannot understand how they came to that conclusion. I don't see even a small part of this case that can be considered an accident. An intelligence agent was found inside a duffel bag that had been padlocked from the outside, and then his entire apartment door had been also locked from the outside. What about that screams accident? That is like the fishiest murder I've ever heard of, and I've been doing Mystery Mondays for like 6 or 7 years now. And they had come to this conclusion after going through an entire investigation as well. So I don't know if there's like information that we're not privy to that helps them come to this conclusion, or if there's something that's being hidden. But this has to be the least accidental looking unsolved death that I've ever heard of. I mean, maybe they just ruled it an accident because they were like, you know, they went through these investigations and there was just no answers, and they're like, well, what else could it have been? But in that case, why not just leave it as suspicious and unsolved? Like, why rule it an accident? For obvious reasons, there has been so much speculation and so many theories about Gareth's murder and what really happened, and we're going to definitely, delve into all of that. But before we do, there was just one more aspect to this case that I wanted to touch on, that I guess it wasn't really part of the investigation. It was more so media reports, media speculation. There was a lot of speculation about Gareth's sexuality. The media really latched on to a rumor that he was gay and that this was somehow responsible for his death. It was reported multiple times by multiple different media outlets that Gareth was gay and that he attended many gay clubs and saunas at the local red light district. Many of these outlets speculated that the valuable, the £25,000 worth of women's clothing that was found in his closet, they speculated that this indicated that he liked to secretly dress as a woman. Detectives did make inquiries about his private life, and they made inquiries in Vauxhall, where a lot of the gay bars are located. And from their inquiries, they were certain that Gareth was gay. His family, however, has said that they don't believe that he was gay, and they don't believe that he was hiding that sort of thing from them. They had the sort of relationship where if he was gay, there would be no judgment and he would feel very comfortable telling them that. Personally, I don't think that it's super relevant, but it just kept coming up again and again and again. It's something that was mentioned a lot in the media, like a lot in the media. Obviously, even detectives inquired about it. Some newspapers reported, citing unnamed sources, that there was cocaine, gay pornography, and an armory of S&M paraphernalia found inside his apartment. Some outlets also claimed that he often paid for male escorts. Detectives refuted all of these claims and said there was no evidence to support them. Gareth's uncle William also came out to say that he felt that this all read more like a smear campaign. And if this was true, if it was more of a smear campaign, then who is doing this? Who is spreading these lies about Gareth after his death? And why? And who is the unnamed source who is telling this stuff to these media outlets? The thing that makes me feel like it's a smear campaign is because why does it matter if he's gay? Like, why is it so interesting to these news outlets if this man is gay or not? What does it have to do with his death? Why are they reporting it like it's a bad thing almost? I mean, honestly, considering most of these claims are unsubstantiated, his family doesn't believe that any of these claims are true, I'm of the belief that it's just either somebody is like spreading lies about him and trying to smear his name, or it's just the UK media being the UK media, because the UK media is mean. Like, they will try to make anything look scandalous. They will try to bully anyone they can, basically. Like, the UK media is just mean. And they weren't even trying to relate any of this information to his death. They were just putting it out there and say, well, speculate as you will with this new information, basically. And the only real way to speculate about any of this information, there's two ways, is one, it was a scorned lover who murdered him, or two, he was experimenting and that's how he accidentally died. Like, he was trying to do some sort of bondage experiment or something, but I don't see how stuffing yourself and padlocking yourself into a duffel bag would have anything to do with that. And honestly, out of all of the speculation and all of these things that were reported about him, the only two like viable pieces of information were, yes, he did have £25,000 worth of women's clothing in his wardrobe, and two, potentially he was gay, but that was never verified. And I don't see what it would have to do with the case. The claims of him recreationally using drugs, I think, are completely false because of his line of work. They frequently drug tested him and there was never any repercussions for that. Like, he would have been terminated if he was recreationally using drugs, and they also did an extensive background test on him. There was two other pieces of information that, I thought I would mention that couldn't be verified. One of which was that in the months leading up to his death, apparently he told his employers that he was being followed, but like I said, I couldn't verify this. And then also the Daily Mail reported that his personal laptop went missing. So with all of that information of the case, let's talk about some theories. In March of 2012, an inquest into Gareth's death actually began, and there was a lot of information that came out during this inquest. And although there was still a lot of unanswered questions, it did start to kind of help fill in some of the blanks in the case. In March of 2012, there was actually an inquest into Gareth's death, and there was a lot of new information that came out during this inquest. Although there was still a lot of unanswered questions, it did help to fill in some of the blanks in the case. The Williams family lawyer argued that there was a second person present when Gareth was murdered, or that somebody had broken into Gareth's apartment after his murder and had stolen some items. He said in a pre-inquest interview, quote, "The impression of the family is that the unknown third party was a member of some agency specializing in the dark arts of the secret services, or evidence has been removed post-mortem by experts in those dark arts." I couldn't find confirmation that any items were actually taken from his apartment or were missing from his apartment, but it really makes you wonder if there is a lot more information that wasn't released to the public. And unfortunately for Gareth's family, because there was such a lack of evidence and no signs of forced entry, it was really difficult to prove these claims. As I mentioned earlier, the door to Gareth's apartment was locked from the outside, so there definitely is some merit to the claims, but without any evidence, there's really nothing that they can do. The two experts who tried to lock themselves in a bag similar to the one Gareth was found in, they made 400 attempts to close themselves in the duffel bag and then padlock it from inside the duffel bag. And one of those experts said that they thought it was possible but unlikely, and even if he had managed to lock it from the inside, it would have only taken 2 or 3 minutes for him to pass out. During the inquest, Gareth's private life came into question again when they started looking into the trace amounts of GHB that were found in his system, because apparently GHB is a very popular drug in the gay nightlife scene, and it just kind of fueled the rumors that he was gay and he was involved in that scene. The Williams' lawyer put forward that perhaps Gareth's lifestyle rendered him unsuitable for MI6, to which this MI6 senior officer responded that there's no set lifestyle for anyone that works in MI6. Cian Jones, a woman who described herself as a close friend of Gareth, denied that Gareth did dress in women's clothing. She said, quote, "We talked about all kinds of things, personal matters. I feel he would have been able to confide in me. I wouldn't have been judgmental." The one thing I will say about, those sort of comments is that you may feel like he would want to confide in you, but it may have nothing to do with you. It may have to do with himself that he doesn't want to confide it in you. So all of these people saying, "I don't believe it because he would have told me," I don't necessarily think that that's true. I think there is a possibility that, he did like to dress in women's clothing, that he was gay, and that he just didn't want to tell his family, he didn't want to tell his friends, and that's okay. It was also heard that Gareth Williams made a small number of illicit searches on the MI6 database, and while we don't know what these searches entail, if they were malicious in intent, they definitely could have made him a potential threat against his own government or maybe another government. Something else that came out in the inquest is that there was actually semen found near the sink in the bathroom when Gareth's body was found, and this could definitely point to the fact that he was involved in some sort of sexual activity, and this duffel bag was some sort of sexual activity that he was involved in prior to his death or during his death, or that resulted in his death. His was the only DNA that was found there, so there wasn't another person's DNA, so you can't really say that he was involved in a sexual activity with another person. In the end, the verdict from this inquest was that Gareth's death was unnatural and likely to have been criminally meditated. They also said that they were, quote, "satisfied that on the balance of probabilities that Gareth was killed unlawfully." So basically what they're saying is that it's more likely than not that somebody else was responsible for his death, for putting him in that bag and closing it up and padlocking him in there. The coroner said that he was likely alive when he was put in the bag, and that he either died from CO2 poisoning or from a fast-acting poison. They also rejected claims of this being a suicide, which I have to agree with, because I don't see any world in which an MI6 GCHQ agent dies under such suspicious circumstances, and it's actually just because he's managed to squeeze himself into a duffel bag while he's still alive, and then somehow managed to do it up, and then somehow managed to padlock it from the outside, and then somehow also managed to lock the door to his apartment from the outside as well. They were also very critical of his employer during this inquest because why did it take them so long to report him missing? There was 7 days in which he did not turn up for work, 7 days in which they didn't hear from him at all. It's not like he called up to say, hey, I'm not coming into work. He didn't show up. He didn't contact them, and they didn't try to contact his family, contact the police, report him missing, nothing. The inquest also said that any reports of autoerotic activity and all of these claims of cross-dressing weren't actually relevant to the case, and that it was more so a media manipulation tactic. They were also critical of the Metropolitan Police's counterterrorism department for failing to inform the senior investigating officer about 9 USB sticks and, other things that they had found in Gareth's office. They also said that they had not taken any statements when interviewing intelligence officers. So the inquest basically said that the line of inquiry that an intelligence officer could be involved in Gareth's death was a genuine line of inquiry. So after the verdict came out from this inquest, the Metropolitan Police began reinvestigating Gareth's death, and the investigation spanned over the course of 12 months. And then at the end of the investigation, they said, yep, we still believe he died alone by accidentally trapping himself and locking himself in that duffel bag. That really dumbfounded me. It's honestly suspicious that they keep saying it was an accident. They should just say we don't have enough evidence to prove anything, instead of being like, yeah, we're ruling it an accident. Why rule it an accident? Just rule it that you can't solve it. Like, just rule it as a cold case or something. It genuinely baffles me. So with that, that's pretty much all of the information in this case. Let's talk about a couple of theories. The first theory, of course, is that it is an accidental death, which I'm not even going to touch on because I feel like I have touched on it enough in this video and I think it's stupid. Another potential theory is that this occurred and he died during some sort of sexual activity or bondage activity in which the person he was hooking up with locked him in this duffel bag. And I think the reason for this theory is mainly just his semen that was found in the bathroom. I don't think this holds any merit though. First of all, the semen, it's his bathroom. He could just be having a good time in there by himself and that was left there. Second of all, this murder just seems way too well thought out to be the work of some random hookup. Like, there is no DNA evidence whatsoever, no forensic evidence. There's no evidence to connect anybody whatsoever to this crime. And also you would think if somebody put him in that duffel bag and he was like, hooking up with them, he would try to get out. He'd be like, why aren't you letting me out? And then he would try to claw his way out, but there was no signs of that happening whatsoever. Unless maybe they poisoned him or something or knocked him unconscious before they put him in there. I don't know. Another theory is that this was the work of his own government. I mean, it's incredibly suspicious that a government intelligence agency didn't realize that one of their employees was missing. I mean, this is a guy who has a lot of confidential, sensitive information. You'd think they would want to be on top of him going missing in case somebody's taken him and they're like trying to get this information out of him. Whatever the case is, you would think that they would be more aware and on top of it. As it turns out, MI6 did kind of have an inkling that he was missing because he missed a meeting with some colleagues, and so they tried to call him and then they tried to go to his apartment, and obviously they did not get a hold of him because he was in the apartment dead. Despite this, he wasn't reported to police until his sister Kerry raised the alarm with GCHQ. So they kind of knew he was missing, but they just didn't do anything about it. And this alone is why some people speculate that his own government was involved, because maybe if they already killed him and they already knew he was dead, they made one little phone call, one little visit to his apartment, and they were like, well, that's enough to cover our tracks to see that we actually did try to contact him. I would think that an intelligence agency would be way more aggressive about trying to find an intelligence agent that is missing, considering all of the confidential information that he's got. Some people speculate that maybe Gareth broke protocol and accessed some information that he wasn't supposed to, and that this breach may have led him to uncover some information that, the government did not want him to have and did not want out there. Another theory is that maybe it wasn't his own government, maybe it was a foreign government. Allegedly, at the time of his death, he was actively investigating the Russian government and their ties to money laundering in Eastern Europe. He was was working closely with the Five Eyes, which for those of you that don't know is basically an intelligence alliance that comprises of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the US and the UK. They closely monitor the SWIFT banking network, and so they are able to, basically trace money all around the world. This network is essentially the infrastructure for all banks to communicate globally, so it's constantly under attack from hackers trying to intercept and redirect funds before they reach the desired recipient. So maybe Gareth uncovered something really damning about the Russian government that they didn't want out there and they didn't want, the UK government to know about, or any other government in the world. Or maybe he was working for the Russian government and his own government found out and had to kill him. In 2015, a Russian defector named Boris Karbakov, who was a former KGB member, came out and said that sources in Russia claimed that Russian Foreign Intelligence Service was responsible for Gareth's murder. He said that Gareth Williams may have become a target after refusing to work with the Russian government as a double agent and was likely killed because of it. He may have also uncovered that somebody else working for GCHQ was a Kremlin spy, which is basically like a Russian spy, which just gives them even more reason to want him dead. Boris's theory is that he was injected with an untraceable poison in through his ear, which wouldn't have been detected during an autopsy, especially because his body was so decomposed. But sure, according to the Metropolitan Police, it was just an accident. But yeah, that's everything. That's all of the information for this case. And I really, really look forward to talking to you guys about this one in the comments, because I want to know what theories you believe. I want to know if there are theories you've thought of that maybe I haven't mentioned. I want to pick your brains about this because I have not been able to stop thinking about this case. It is insane. It's insane to me that the Metropolitan Police just keep saying it's an accident again and again and again, when clearly this is not an accident. This is like the least accidental death ever. And it really, like, the fact that they keep pushing that it's an accident really makes me think they're involved in some way. What do they have to gain from just closing the case like that and saying, yep, it's an accident, that's it. Thanks. Honestly, this case boggles my mind and my thoughts are so jumbled up about it. I would love to hear what you think. But yeah, that is all from me today. I really look forward to hearing your thoughts on this case, and hopefully I will talk to you in the comments and see you in my next video. Bye guys.